What's up, everybody? I've gotten a lot of questions on how to set up OBS. I've had a lot of friends kind of chime in and ask, what are the best settings for OBS? What should I set my bitrate to? What should I set my presets to? And this is the video for you. So this is the video you're gonna want for OBS setup. I'm gonna walk you through the whole setup from beginning to end, and I'm gonna walk you through step by step. So the first thing you're gonna wanna do is you're gonna wanna go to obsproject.com. The download links are right on their main page. So obviously most people are gonna be on Windows. So you can go to Windows, click on that. It's gonna start your download immediately. Now they have forums, a community Discord. They've got a lot of great stuff on their page. Their forums have answers to so many questions. So if you're having issues with something, feel free to leave a question down in the comments below and I will try to help you. But if I don't know the answer, the OBS forums are a great place to go to try to find the answer. Now that we're downloaded, we're gonna start our install. Yep, next, yep, that's a good spot. Install, and once you're done, you will have installed OBS 25.0.1, which is the most up-to-date OBS version right now. So if you're watching this video, this is the OBS version that this is really going to be geared towards. Once you install OBS, it's going to ask if you want to run the auto configuration wizard. I would suggest not, and just going through each of these settings one by one to make sure that you get exactly what you need. But if you want something a little bit quicker, you could try that as well. Here in OBS, the first thing you see is just your canvas. You have a blank screen. That's going to be whatever it is that you're recording. We haven't added anything in our sources yet, so it's not recording anything yet. You have a spot down here in your bottom left for your scenes. So if you're streaming, that could be a stream starting soon scene. It could be a be right back scene. It could be a game scene. It could be a window scene if you normally use YouTube or something like that. It could be a couple different things, but this is where all of our scenes are going to be. And then our sources are going to go over here. So our scenes are different types of things that we'll have on screen at one time. Your sources are going to be what you're bringing in individually. So that's the difference there. Over here in the middle, you have an audio mixer. You can see it automatically picked up what my mic was. It's just using the line in on my computer, and you can see the levels up here. So this is a really great resource for making sure your audio is right. You can pull these up and down, so you'll see if I pull this down, it'll bring the volume down on my mic, and you can set that where you'd like it. We'll go through those audio settings here in a second. You have scene transitions, so those are those nice stingers that you might get back and forth. You start by default with a cut and a fade, and you can set the timing of those. And then you have some simple controls here on the right side. So you see start streaming, start recording, studio mode, settings, and exit, so just to close the program. And then while you're streaming, you'll see some settings pop up here in the bottom. How long you've been streaming live, how long you've been recording, CPU usage, and your frames per second. And once you go live, you'll get some more settings as well. It'll tell you if you're dropping any frames and a couple of other things as well. The first place that we're gonna wanna go is to File and Settings. You can also go down on the bottom right corner to Settings, so either one's fine. We're gonna start with General. In General, if you wanna change the language, that's your first option. Your next option is a theme. Usually the dark default theme is the best for most people to keep it dark. You do have some other options. So here is the Acri theme. It's a little bit more of like a modern theme. You have the Rachni theme, and then you have the system one. So the system one is probably going to be the one that's going to get you the brightest light if you're trying to use that as a light source. And you can play around with these and see which one you like. I run the dark by default theme. I think it's perfectly fine for what I need. I would recommend having automatically check for updates on startup checked. That way you know your OBS every time you restart your computer is going to be up to date and working for you. The next one, open stats dialog on startup. That's going to be good for some people, and for most people, it's going to be something that you don't need. So I don't personally use the stats dialog myself, but some people that are more deep users might find some use in that. Your output. Your first option is showing confirmation dialog when starting streams. So that's just asking you, hey, do you want to stream? And you click yes, and then it will go. You also have that option for stopping streams, for stopping recordings, for starting recordings. You have an option for automatically recording when streaming. So if you were to press the start streaming button, it would record at the same time automatically. On these options, I run all of these unchecked. I don't need a confirmation dialog to go live. I actually go live usually from my stream deck. You might want that dialog so that you don't have any accidental streams, that it's 2 clicks you have to make. That might work for a lot of people. Automatically recording when streaming. This is useful for some people who know they're going to record every minute of every stream that they do. For me personally, there are times where I just want to stream or I just want to record, and I don't want to do both every single time. Keep this unchecked, and I have 2 buttons on my stream deck, one for streaming and one for recording, and I can use whichever one that I know I want to use in that video or in that clip or in whatever I'm doing. For this OBS project, I don't want to stream at the same time that I'm recording. This doesn't automatically stream when you click record, but again, I want to be able to click stream and not have it automatically start recording, because then I have to go and delete that file if I don't want to record. It just saves me space on my hard drive. Source alignment snapping is your next section in the general tab. Usually you'll have this enabled by default. You can leave it enabled if you'd like. That just makes it where if you have a source here in your canvas, it will automatically snap to certain places on the canvas. You can set the sensitivity, and here you see your options for how it will snap. So your first option is snap sources to the edge of the screen. That's checked by default. That means that if I was to add a browser source or I was to add something, it would automatically snap to the edge of the screen if I pull it there. And then you have snap sources to other sources. So if you're trying to make sure your title is attached to your webcam, or maybe your alerts are right on the bottom and attached, you can snap those that way. If you find that it's really difficult for you to put something right where you want it, you might want to go and turn these off. Me personally, I usually have it turned off to snap to the edge of the screen and turned off to snap sources to other sources, because I like to put it exactly where I want it. If I want to make sure it's not flying off screen or something, I might check it just to put something and then turn it off. You also have snap sources to horizontal and vertical center. That can be really useful if you're setting up a timer and you want it to make sure it's right in the middle. That can help you with that, but it's unchecked by default. I usually leave it unchecked. Projectors are your next option. So hide cursor over projectors. Those are things like display in game if you want to hide your cursor. I leave it unchecked. I'd like my cursor to show up. Your next section is system tray. So you have it enabled by default, which means if I were to minimize OBS, it's minimized here, but it's also shown in the system tray. So that is a good option to have checked, just to make sure you can get to it from multiple places quickly. Preview is your next option. So hide overflow, that'll hide anything outside of the canvas. You have overflow always visible if you want to make sure you can see what's off the canvas, and show overflow even when source is invisible. I leave all 3 off by default. That way I'm just working with my canvas and I don't have to worry about it. Importers. So you have search known locations for scene collections when importing. So if you keep your scene collections on a file on an external hard drive, or if you keep your scene collections somewhere else, it will automatically search for those in the places you tell it to. Studio mode. Studio mode, you can actually start from here in your settings or down here. It's right below start recording and start streaming above settings on your actual canvas here. Studio mode makes it where you can see 2 scenes at once. I'm going to show you this here in a little bit, but it makes it where you can see what you're going to make changes for on your stream or your recording before you actually make that change. So let's say I have this screen right here, right? Where I'm in a little window here explaining something, and I have OBS, sorry, wrong direction. I have OBS over here on my main portion of my recording where you can see that. Well, that just makes it so you can switch back and forth from maybe just your screen, just your face, where that's all you're recording, you're talking to camera, and you can flip back. You also have portrait vertical layout. So if you have your OBS in a portrait format, that's an up and down vertical format. That's what I use on my stream PC because that's where I have chat. You can enable that and it will kind of move it around and fit better for you. You also have show preview program labels. I leave that checked by default. I have this checked by default, but that's going to depend on your use case of where you have OBS. But this is generally where I have my general settings set up. So if you'd like to just take a peek at what I have checked and kind of work from there, this is what works for me. Our next section is our stream section, a very easy section. This is just where you're going to choose your service. Twitch is your first option. Then you have YouTube, YouTube Gaming, Mixer, Facebook Live, Restream.io, RTMP, and FTL if you use Restream, Twitter/Periscope, and then you have even more if you click Show All. I'm just going to click Twitch by default. You can also use Connect Account. If you just click Service Twitch, the way that you're going to get your stream in here is by using your stream key. It will automatically select the best server for you, but if you'd like to choose a specific server, you can do that. Your stream key is what OBS uses to communicate with Twitch. And if I was to go to Twitch, on the main splash screen when I get here, I can go up here to the top right corner to whatever you have your logo set, or if you don't have a logo, it'll be a little gray box up here. You can click that. you can go to your creator dashboard, and from here you can get access to a few different things. I'm going to show how to set up all the settings within Twitch's settings in a later video. So if you'd like to see that, be sure to like, subscribe to the channel, and you'll see that go up here soon. To get to your stream key, you'll go to your preferences and channel, and your primary Steam key is right here. So I'm not going to click show for you. I'm just going to simply click copy. Now I have my stream key copied. I can go into OBS and I can paste it. Again, you can't see it. Shout out these dots. And now your stream key is in Twitch. You're done. The way that I would recommend you connecting your Twitch to OBS would be the connect account method, because it's direct. You don't have to do your stream key like that. I would use the connect account method. It's the easiest for most people. So you could just click that button, sign in, and you're good. Now, our next section is output. This is where we're going to do a little bit of work. So by default, output mode is set to simple. You have two sections here in the output section, streaming and recording. Most people are just going to stream and then they'll download their VODs later if that's what they want to do. So for streaming, the most important thing for us for Twitch is our video bitrate, our encoder, and our audio bitrate. And so here, just simply, it's set by default to 2500 kilobits per second. Hardware NVENC, I do have a GTX 980 Ti as a graphics card, so it's choosing that by default. And then the audio bitrate is there at 160 by default. And then I can enable advanced encoder settings, and that will give me options to enforce streaming service bitrate limits, which is checked by default. And encoder preset is set to quality by default. You also have a box for custom encoder settings. So that's just a box where you can add different parameters that you might want on top of that. Most people won't need that. So now by default, if you have a single PC setup, then I would suggest you use NVENC for your encoder. That's because your graphics card is probably more capable than your CPU in your gaming PC. It will be able to take the game with maybe a little bit of a lowered setting, plus you're streaming at 2500 kilobits by default, and be just fine. This is about where I would stay if you're just starting out for video bitrate and encoder. And your audio bitrate, I don't think Twitch sends anything higher than 160 kilobit per second audio bitrate. So I don't know if that actually has any benefit to be any higher than 160. I would leave it there by default. These settings here are going to be different for a lot of people, and that's going to depend on the type of computer that you have, if you have a 1 PC setup or a 2 PC setup, and what your internet capabilities are. Here where I live, I have gigabit internet. I have gigabit up and gigabit down. So I have a pretty fast internet connection speed. I would normally run 6,000 kilobits per second through NVENC. That's where I'd be. And I do run it at quality. I don't believe you get any difference between max quality and quality unless you have an RTX card. I could be wrong on that. Flame me in the comments below if I am, but I usually just run it at quality. To check what your setting should be, you're gonna go to stream.twitch.tv/encoding. And if you go there, Twitch has their settings on here labeled for you to be able to put these things into OBS, XSplit, whatever you're using, and get the best quality you can. And it tells you based on if you're using NVENC and if you're using X264. So over here, I obviously said that I use NVENC. Your other option is X264. NVENC is using a GTX or RTX graphics card from NVIDIA. Software is using your CPU. So sorry if you're an AMD GPU user. Hopefully AMD comes up with a solution for themselves in their next line of cards here in 2020, and we'll have an option for AMD users as well. So on the Twitch page that I'm sending you to, that's stream.twitch.tv/encoding, it has set up for NVIDIA NVENC specs and X264 or CPU streaming specs. If you're using your GPU or NVENC to stream, set what you're streaming at here with these settings. If you're using your CPU to stream, set it over here on the X264 settings. So for me, I'm capturing in 1080p 60 frames per second. Let's say I want to stream because I'm just starting out in 720p at 60 frames per second, a little bit lower. This tells me what to set my resolution, my bit rate, my rate control, my frame rate, my keyframe interval, my preset, and my B-frames too. Some of these I have not gotten into, but if we go back to OBS, you'll see if I make this output mode to advanced, you'll start seeing more of those. So if you take your output mode and make that advanced, you're going to see a lot more that you can alter here. in your output settings for streaming and recording and audio. Most people only need simple. We'll get into some of these deeper settings like keyframe intervals and such like that once I show you the output mode for advanced. But let's say we're gonna do 720p 60 frames per second. So our resolution will be 1280 by 720. Our bitrate needs to be set at 4500 kilobits per second. Our rate control is CBR, 60 or 50 frames per second is our frame rate. Our keyframe interval is 2 seconds, preset quality, B-frames 2. The only thing that I see is my kilobits per second. So if I'm streaming at 720p, that needs to be 4500. I can just go to OBS, type in 4500, and there we go. And then quality. Those are the only two settings I see. So you're good, you're set for streaming if that's what you're gonna be streaming in. Your internet speed is gonna be very dependent on which one of these that you pick. So if you have a very fast internet speed, and depending on what kind of computer you have, you can push higher. I'm pushing 1080p 60 frames per second for recording, but I only stream at 720p 60 frames per second. And I have a pretty substantial gaming and streaming PC setup. That's because I want more people to be able to watch my stream. The higher you go, if you're not partnered, you will not have transcoding, and some people will not be able to watch your stream, unfortunately. I would suggest most people want to be down here at 720p 60 frames per second if they're not an affiliate yet and they're not a partner yet. So once you have that set on streaming, if you're going to record at the same time, under simple settings, it's going to use the exact same hardware NVENC or X264, your CPU, as your streaming setting. So you can change the recording path here to wherever you'd like that to be. You can generate the file name without spaces just for organization for you. You can change your recording quality to the same as your stream. High quality, indistinguishable, and lossless quality. So these are just going to depend on how big of a file you actually want. And then you have different recording formats. I would not suggest you switch as a new user to OBS from anything from MKV, which is what it is at by default. If you switch from MKV, if for some reason your stream goes down or you lose internet access, you will lose that file. So the only one that will make sure that you don't lose the recording file if your internet goes down or something goes wrong is MKV. If I switch this to MP4, which is what most people would actually want it in, it will give you a warning that says recording saved to MP4 will be unrecoverable if the file cannot be finalized. Always safest to leave it at MKV, and then you have some custom settings if you want to do some other things. And you can also enable a replay buffer. Now, if you want to get into the advanced setting, advanced gives you more options on what you can do with your streaming and your recording. By default, audio track is set to 1. I'm going to show you where that will be here in a minute to change your audio tracks around, but we leave it at 1. That's just a good place for your streaming audio track to be. And then you have the option change your encoder here again. NVIDIA NVENC, if you have a GTX card, is a great option if you're on a one PC setup, or you can use your CPU if you have a very strong CPU at X264. So we'll just leave it on NVENC for right now. That will change the settings down there at the bottom, and I will go through both. But if you're on NVENC, I would uncheck enforce streaming service encoder settings because that supersedes what you're doing below. So leaving that unchecked, make sure that your settings are going through. You have the option to rescale output here. I would not suggest rescaling your output here. We're gonna actually do that when we get later to video if you wanna rescale your output. I would say that CBR is what most people use. When they're starting, you do have CQP, VBR, and lossless if you want some other option. Our bit rate, again, we said 4500 would be our 720p 60 frames per second bit rate. Our keyframe interval, we will change that to 2, and that is based on the settings suggested by Twitch, and that's for all of their different pixel density settings and frame rate settings. We can set our preset again like we did before. We're gonna leave it at quality, and quality is where Twitch suggests all of their stay at anyway. Our profile, we will have it at high or main by default. I always make that high just so it's high priority. Look ahead, we leave unchecked, and then psychovisual tuning, we leave checked. GPU, we set at 0, and max B frames, we leave at 2. Those are set there by default. If these settings aren't working for you, I would say the first place where you might want to check for a problem is in the bit rate. You might need to lower your bit rate if your internet speed, your upload speeds are not fast enough, or you don't have enough bandwidth. This is where I would change settings. The rest of them are pretty generic for most people. Now, for me, I stream at 720p 60 frames per second. I leave this at 6K. 6,000 is the limit of what Twitch will allow you to stream at unless you're a partner. For most people on Twitch, 6,000 is the cap. So don't go above it. You're just wasting power on your GPU or your CPU. Now, if you're gonna run X264 for your CPU, audio track stays at 1. We don't check enforce streaming service encoder settings. We don't rescale our output here. Rate control, we'll leave it CBR. We'll make this bit rate 4,500 kilobits per second. We will not check use custom buffer size. Keyframe interval, we will set at 2. CPU usage preset. This is where you're gonna see, if you're using your CPU, a lot of hurt being done to your CPU. So if you go in game and you're like, wow, I'm dropping frames, or I'm not getting the quality that I want out of my stream, this is probably where it's coming from on the CPU side if you're streaming with your CPU. So you can change this. The higher you go, the less CPU you use. And duh, it says that right there. So if you have a worse CPU, you'll want to be higher on the list than if you have like an i9 top of the line CPU, you might want to be a little bit lower. Most people can just leave it at very fast and go from there. If I leave mine at very fast, I feel that I have a pretty good quality of stream. With very fast, it works for me. Profile, we will set that to high as well, even with the CPU. Tune, we will do nothing with. So that's if you were setting up your stream with X264 or your CPU. Now, if you want to record at the same time, you have options for that. So you have standard options and custom output options. I only use the standard options. That's all I'm going to go through in this video. You can set your recording path here. You can generate file name without space. I have that checked. You have recording format. Again, I would suggest not switching it from MKV. You can set which audio tracks you will record. And we're going to set up our advanced audio here in a little bit, but I would just go ahead and select whichever ones you think you're going to use, or just all of them, just so you know you're recording them just in case you need them later. And then encoder. I run a 2 PC setup. I stream using NVIDIA NVENC and I record using X264. That's because my stream PC has a GTX 1050 Ti that I use just for the stream, and then I actually use my CPU just for recording. And then I can kind of have them separate from each other. They won't affect each other for the most part. Most people will probably leave that as use stream encoder, but there are situations where you'd like to see this change. So if you're streaming using NVIDIA NVENC because you have a good graphics card, you might want to use X264 to record with your CPU so that you're not seeing any losses in game from your graphics card doing recording, streaming, and trying to play a game. We won't change our rescale output. We don't need any custom muxer settings. Our rate of control here can be left at CBR. I would suggest just sticking with CBR. It works perfectly fine. You can set your bitrate a little bit higher when you're recording. So you might do something between 20,000 and 30,000 kilobits per second. The higher that goes, the bigger file size you're gonna have. So if you want higher quality, up the bit rate, or you can lower it from there too. So if we don't need to use a custom buffer size there. Some people might for their use cases, but most people don't need that. Keyframe interval, we will still set to 2, just like our stream. CPU usage preset works the same as if you're streaming. The higher this goes, the less CPU, the lower it goes, the more CPU. You can leave it at very fast for the most part. Your profile, you can set to high. We don't need any tune. And then you have some other options here. So this is a good base setting if you're gonna use your CPU to record right there. If you're gonna use NVIDIA NVENC, it looks very much the same way. You're just gonna leave it at CBR. Again, you can change that bit rate. 20,000 is a good starting place for most people. Keyframe interval 2. Preset is at quality, profiles at high. We don't check look ahead, and we do check psychovisual tuning. 0 for your GPU and 2 for your max B frames by default. Under audio, track 1 will for the most part be your streaming audio. You can set a name for that here. So you can set the name of that to just streaming, and you'll know what it is. Twitch doesn't push anything higher than 160 kilobits per second audio bit rate, so you can leave that at that. But if you're gonna record to other tracks, so maybe on track 2 you want your game and your voice, and that's the only thing you record to edit later in YouTube, I would suggest just throwing these all the way up to 320. It's gonna be a bigger file size by doing that, but it's just the highest quality audio that you can record in. And then you can call this one game/mic. And then if you're gonna use all of them, you could have each of these be individual. So you could record your game on track 3 and your mic separately on track 4. This just allows you to record exactly what you want and play around with it later. It's good to do and be future-proof there. Your replay buffer, that depends on if you use that. I don't use a replay buffer, but you can enable it here and that will set your time. So now we're ready to move on into audio. Most people under general and audio will keep it at 44.1 kilohertz for their sample rate. If you don't know that you need to change this, just leave it. Channels, you have mono, stereo, 2.1, 4.0, all the way up to 7.1. Most people are just gonna leave it at stereo and not mess with it. Now, your devices under audio, this is where you can set what's coming in from your desktop audio. That would just be from your computer's regular default settings for whatever you listen to, whether that's a speaker system or headphone out or whatever you use. And down here, you can set hotkeys for push to mute or push to talk within the audio bracket. Under video, this is where we're gonna change our base canvas resolution. That's what I'm capturing or what my screen is. And I can also change my output or my scaled resolution. So that's what I send to Twitch. You also have a downscale filter, which is gonna go through and sharpen that image up, and your FPS that you're gonna be streaming in. Most people will leave their base canvas resolution to 1920 by 1080. Now your output scaled resolution is what you're gonna be sending to Twitch. So we set our settings up to stream at 1280 by 720. It was there for me by default, but if you'd like to one day stream at 1920 by 1080, that's where you can change that. I would suggest most people stick to 1280 by 720. You'll probably get a better stream, and most people won't really be able to tell the difference if they're watching on their phone or a device like that. Now, the downscale filter is set to bicubic by default. So most people, you'll stay there at bicubic. And then your FPS value. For me, I stream at 60 frames per second, so I set that here. And I would say most people are gonna switch between 30 and 60. Our next section includes hotkeys. So here you can set hotkeys for doing certain things through OBS. So that's starting to stream, stopping your stream, starting record, stopping a record. You have so many options here for things you can set up hotkeys for. You also have advanced as your last category in our settings. In advanced, you have your first area under general, which is process priority. Most people will just leave it at normal. Your recording path is right here. This will change how your file names formatted. So this is what they're going to come out looking as. You can overwrite if file exists, and you can also automatically remux to MP4. This option right here is one that I do check. It's very useful. I can record an MKV and then have OBS automatically transition that file from an MKV file to MP4. And then I can open that up in Adobe Premiere, DaVinci Resolve, and any other normal video editing software and edit that video for YouTube or for anywhere else I want to put it. Your replay buffer file name prefix you can change here if you need to. The only thing that I really change here is automatically remux to MP4. Your stream delay, if you want to delay between what you're doing on your computer and what OBS is picking up and what's being put to Twitch, you can set a delay here. Some of the bigger streamers do select this if they want to make sure that people aren't stream sniping them. I don't use this by default because I want to be able to interact with chat quickly. Your next option is automatically reconnect. I do have that enabled. It is enabled by default. Dynamically change bitrate to manage congestion. I would not recommend clicking that unless you have a lot of fluctuation on your home network that might cause you problems. And then when you're done, you'll click apply and okay, and your settings are set. So your scenes are your different snapshots of what you're doing. You're starting soon, your be right back, your game, and anything else you want to use if you want to have a lobby screen or something like that. Your sources are whatever you're adding to that scene, that individual scene. And then you have your audio mixer over here. So by default, it's set up and down like this. I like to use it in a vertical layout. That way I can see them all a little bit easier and change the sliders. You want to set your mic up where it's just about hitting the red. That's where we'll start clipping, but that's a good volume. Your desktop audio would be whatever your computer is picking up. So I can actually click the gear and get more settings for my audio devices where I can lock the volume if I never want it to be changed. So if I know my mic's good, I can lock it. You also have ones that you can hide. So I'm never going to change the volume for my webcam background. So I'm just going to mute it and then I'm going to hide it. And then you also have advanced audio properties. This is a great window that OBS offers where you can set your audio tracks and whether it's mono or not. I would say you want your mic on mono. That's just one that I noticed. The others you don't really need to do anything with it. You can also change the volume from here. You can see what's active and what's not active along with the name of the actual source. Now your tracks are where you're going to actually send audio to your stream or to certain tracks of your recording. So by default, they're all checked, right? We don't really want all of them checked past 1. So I go through and I uncheck them. And now our track 1, so now we're only putting right now on track 1, desktop audio and mic/aux. You could also have alerts or different sounds that play or videos that play that you want sent to your stream. You want to make sure that's on track 1. And then we set some of our other ones for game/mic. So we wanted track 2 to be game/mic. Track 3 we set as like just our mic, maybe if we want to just record our vocals to use later in an editor. So for me, on track 1, I have everything. On track 2, I play music while I'm on stream, and track 2 is everything minus the music. Track 3 is game and my mic, and track 4 is just my mic. And those are the ones that I use. You need to kind of see what your usage case is and do what you need to do, but that's a baseline for what I use. So if you sign in with Twitch, you do get the option under view and docs to pull your chat in. So this is really useful if you want your chat here in OBS. So you can resize it the way that you want it, and you can have your chat right here in OBS with you. So you can pull an activity feed where you can see who follows, subscribes, gives bits, and you can put that in there too, have it in a little window with your chat. So this is how I have mine usually set up. Again, I have my monitor, my side monitor in a portrait mode, so there's a lot more space, but I usually have my Twitch stats, my stream information so I can change it quickly, my chat in the middle, and then my activity feed down there at the bottom, and then OBS over here. And you can resize this to give more space. Maybe you want more of your preview, maybe you want it smaller. You have options, but this is a really great tool to use if you're not using those already. That's under docs, under view right there. So that is a quick overview of everything that I can think of in OBS that like a general user would need the first time through. If you found this helpful, be sure to like the video, subscribe here to the channel. We're gonna have a lot more videos coming out about how to set audio filters and how to add individual things, or maybe do some things that are a little bit more in depth in OBS in the future. And we look forward to seeing you in the next one.